kind of wanted to touch on the offense a little bit. I know we mentioned the slow start. Did you find it interesting at all that, and I was actually watching this with a good friend of mine, and we were talking about, over the last couple of weeks, Buckner had been getting a lot more play on first series, second series, whatever, depending on whether it was down and distance, third and short, whatever, red zone, backed up in your own territory, whatever. They had these like kind of special roles for him. And today it was sort of the Jack Cohn show for almost the entire first half, until they decided to go with Buckner for one drive. And then they, of course, go ahead and put it in the end zone. And then from there on out, he got more play. Cohn obviously started playing better after that, certainly. And the offense just flowed. But I don't know. I just found it interesting that, especially against a team like Navy, where you feel like athleticism would sort of be the key, and Navy wouldn't be able to account for, Buckner's running ability, his passing ability, along with Kyron Williams, Logan Diggs, Chris Tyree, running the football. I thought it was interesting that they waited so long to go to Buckner. And then when they did, of course, it worked out.
Right. Yeah. I think, you hit the nail on the head. I think there were, a few people on Twitter kind of saying the same thing. When you see Jack Cohn back there and Navy's dropping 8 into pass coverage, which is obviously, that's good strategy against Jack Cohn. What's he going to do? Run for 2 yards? I know he had the 21.
Not last week, Ben. Not last week.
I know. I did actually. I know I wasn't on the show with you, but I did actually end up watching that game, not 100% live, but regardless, you would live with Jack Cohn running for 5 or 6 yards once in a while, in those types of situations. So that was a good strategy, and I'm like, well, just put Tyler Buckner in and run a QB draw, or they don't drop 8. They know that Tyler Buckner's in, and now you can at least throw the ball, because I know you've talked to Robbie Toma a couple weeks back on your podcast, and I follow him on Twitter. He's a good guy to follow during Notre Dame games, because he kind of puts it in a nice player's perspective, in a very real, puts it into he says all the time about how the casual fan doesn't understand this and that, and he's right. He's absolutely right. He said, I'd like to see a lot of you couch quarterbacks throw into 8 men in coverage, and like, yeah, exactly. So I don't know if Notre Dame fans are killing Jack Cohn for not doing that. That's not the right. You can call for Tyler Buckner in that situation, because maybe that plays into his strength a little bit, but you can't get all over Jack Cohn because he's not throwing into 8 defensive backs, essentially, and linebackers in coverage. So I don't know. Yeah, I really thought that Buckner would get the call a little bit earlier, just to kind of, I don't know, make that defense do something different, I guess. And I overall, I don't know what they're doing with Buckner to a certain degree. Played so well against Virginia Tech, and I know that Cohn brought him back and that type of stuff. I thought we would start to see a little bit higher percentage of snaps for Buckner. I don't know. I don't know. That situation is not one that I completely understand yet.
Yeah, and that was really what my point was, overall. And, I know you weren't disagreeing, but just to kind of further emphasize that, it really wasn't anything that Cohn did wrong. Overall, today he was 23 of 29. He had a touchdown, didn't turn the ball over, had, almost 270 yards passing. It was really just those first 3 drives. You felt like Navy was just not respecting the fact that Cohn could do things with his legs. And to a certain extent, that's completely fair. When you drop 8 and you have a pass rush that got to him a few times here and there, when you can guard the receivers for, 4 or 5 seconds, and then he kind of gets antsy in the pocket, why wouldn't you go with Buckner, bring in 2 more guys in the box that have to account for him, and then not only can Buckner pull it and run, he can keep the ball, and Kyron Williams is maybe the best running back in college football. And then not only that, but Buckner has shown over the last several weeks that he's continuing to prove as a passer. He can on the RPOs, he can throw or run, which he's shown a few times, and then he has a cannon. He's hit Austin deep on 50-yard go routes, and so on and so forth. So going to your point, it really was more of like a interesting coaching decision at least from my standpoint, versus Cone playing poorly. And a few, because I also thought a few of those sacks, and I've been pretty critical of Cone throughout the year in regards to some of the sacks being on him. I didn't really feel like some of the sacks were on him today. Like I think there was one on fourth down specifically where it was a blitz and the guy was in his face right away. So it's like, what do you want him to do? He's either throwing that away, trying to make something happen that he shouldn't, and throws a pick, or so on and so forth, or he takes the sack and Notre Dame punts, or Navy gets the ball back, and then you hope for the best from there, and then you get the ball back after that. And ironically enough, I think it was Buckner that came in right after that drive, and that's when they had their first touchdown. And I think that's when the staff finally realized, hey, we need to mix this up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Buckner seems to be the spark. I don't like feeling like I'm insinuating that Tyler Buckner needs to start. But how many times, I guess, are we going to see? Because, like you said, it's not Jack Cohn's fault. Like I got to continue to make that disclaimer, but it just sort of seems like how many times are we going to start slow with Jack Cohn, have Tyler Buckner come in, spark the offense, score, and then we're okay. Maybe just do that on the first drive of the game is kind of my thought. I mean, it doesn't mean that Jack Cohn can't play, because I do think that Jack Cohn, has an element to him that helps this offense, especially if they're going with, a little bit more of the hurry up, which they didn't really do a ton of today, which also perplexed me. I sort of thought get Navy on their heels a little bit, and could Navy even handle that? I sort of thought not, and we didn't really sort of see that. So if we're talking about coaching decisions, that's another one that I don't fully get. I guess I don't have to fully get. I mean, I get to talk about it, that I don't get it, and it makes hopefully for good listening. But I don't know. Like I am perplexed about a lot of things, but at the end of the day, at least I'm perplexed after 34-6 instead of some other alternative, something that could have been a lot worse.
You stole my word. I was going to say that was the perplexing thing about the whole thing today was I think it was the tempo. I mean, the last two games, they've been terrific on offense overall, no matter who had been there. And ironically enough, I think that they had actually found a good role for Buckner. He didn't have to be the starter, but you go tempo, and Buckner completes, 3 or 4 passes in a row, and all of a sudden you're on the 30-yard line. You bring in Buckner, defense is gassed, and you RPO him to death. And then, boom, you're in the end zone for a touchdown. And I thought that was a really interesting way to use both quarterbacks. And today it felt like, okay, today it's going to be Buckner's drive or it's going to be Cohn's drive, which, you can get away with against Navy. And maybe they were trying to try a few different things out and, give Buckner more time as being like the main guy for a series here or two, and keep Cohn in on situations that they maybe sometimes bring Buckner in, and so on and so forth. Again, like you said, we're not the coaches. We just get to talk about it. And, I don't even think that we'll ever really hear that from the coaches, because they're not going to give away their game plan and so on and so forth. But I'd be surprised if next week against Virginia, especially if Armstrong is healthy and ready to go, they're a high-powered offense. I'd be pretty surprised if Notre Dame doesn't go back to their tempo offense and do exactly what I said. You go tempo. Cohn's able to complete passes, quick routes, get the ball out quick in general, and lead the team down the field. And then like I said, you bring in Buckner, whether it's short yardage, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, whatever it is, or you're in the red zone and you want to run something different that maybe Cohn can't provide. And that's really going to be a terror to the defense that's not necessarily prepared for it in that specific down and distance or whatever it may be. So that's kind of what I want to believe, is that maybe the coaching staff, not the players, were like, okay, this is a game that we're going to win, and we're going to try a few things out and maybe get guys prepared for different types of situations down the road.
Well, yeah, that's been Brian Kelly's. I don't know. I mean, they've done that in 12 years under Brian Kelly. They don't necessarily wait until they're blowing a team out to try a couple things, because they want to see it in a real live game situation where the other team has obviously schemed for them and done that type of stuff. So. Yeah, I mean, I think there is a little bit of that goes on, and it drives Notre Dame fans crazy. It drives me crazy to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, I know that recently it just seems like every day there's people especially when rankings and things come out, how good is Notre Dame, all of this type of stuff. They want to talk about how good Notre Dame is or isn't. I think it says something to how good they are that they're willing to kind of come out and be like, okay, like we're going to give this a shot because we think at the end of the day, we're just going to, we're going to win anyway. And they've done that a lot, and they've pretty much generally gotten away. It's not like they're going out, when they play against Georgia or whoever, Clemson, whoever the big names that they've played over the last few years, and trying out new stuff. But I do think that, this is, and they've said it a million times, transitional year. How many times have you heard that term? And, they're finding what works with and who it works for, because they can win these games and do that. You'd like for it to look a little bit better, I guess. And, we could talk about that round and round for hours and hours, but we won't.